American infantry in February 1943 was a force the Germans underestimated completely. On February 19th, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel stood in the Tunisian desert, observing the chaos at Kasserine Pass. His Africa Corps had shredded American positions like a knife through paper. Tanks were abandoned in the sand. Artillery pieces lay captured before crews could fire a single round. Entire battalions scattered across 50 miles of chaotic retreat. In 6 days, the Americans suffered 6,500 casualties, including 3,000 captured. Rommel wrote to his wife that night with something approaching satisfaction. "The Americans," he noted, "have not yet learned how to fight." That assessment, however, only captured a moment, not the trajectory. 3,000 miles away, in a prisoner-of-war camp outside London, German General Gunther Blumentritt would later recount to British military historian Basil Liddell Hart a far more nuanced view. "We regarded General Patton extremely highly," Blumentritt said. "The most aggressive panzer general of the Allies, a man of incredible initiative and lightning-like action. His operations impressed us enormously, probably because he came closest to our concept of the classical military commander. He even improved on Napoleon's basic tenet: speed and more speed." The Germans believed Americans were amateurs at Kasserine. Blumentritt knew that this perception would soon change. Between those two judgments lay one of the most remarkable military transformations in modern history. German soldiers described their enemies differently. The British, professional and methodical; the Canadians, ruthless; the Americans, overwhelming, unpredictable, relentless, and terrifying in their firepower. American infantry would redefine how German soldiers measured threat. Before the Americans entered the war, German intelligence had already underestimated them. In 1939, the United States Army ranked 19th globally in size, smaller than the armies of Portugal and Romania. Factories produced cars, washing machines, and consumer goods, not tanks or artillery. Soldiers were inexperienced. Officers were green. Society was divided by class, ethnicity, and politics. Nazi ideology added its own weight. Hitler believed that a nation's strength flowed from racial purity and cultural homogeneity. America, a nation of immigrants, could not possibly match German martial spirit. The First World War seemed to confirm this prejudice. American troops had arrived in France in 1917 and performed adequately. They suffered relatively light casualties, arrived late, and influenced strategy minimally. German officers remembered the Green Doughboys as brave but tactically naive, willing to attack frontally but unable to sustain complex operations. The idea that their sons would fight differently seemed implausible. At Kasserine Pass, every German assumption seemed validated. Major General Lloyd Fredendall commanded Second Corps with catastrophic incompetence. He spread his forces across a 30-mile front, leaving units isolated and unsupported. Headquarters sat 70 miles behind the front in a mountain bunker, disconnected from reality. Orders were confused. Communications broke down. Tactical awareness was almost non-existent. Engineers dug his underground command post instead of preparing defensive positions. Soldiers trained in England and North Africa faced real combat for the first time. Replacements had arrived only days before the battle, some without completing basic training. On February 14th, 1943, Rommel struck with confidence forged from 2 years defeating the British across the desert. Panzers rolled through gaps in the American line that should never have existed. Artillery positions fell before firing effective salvos. Infantry broke and fled, abandoning millions of dollars in equipment. American tanks, exposed without infantry, burned under accurate fire from German 88mm guns. Panic spread. Officers lost contact with men. Units were destroyed in detail. Prisoners numbered in the thousands. Omar Bradley would later call Kasserine probably the worst performance of United States Army troops in their proud history. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. Leadership failed at every level. Coordination collapsed. Tactical proficiency was absent. Germans concluded that Americans lacked the toughness, cohesion, and experience necessary for sustained combat. Material abundance could not compensate for poor leadership. Diverse backgrounds produced soldiers without the shared identity that reinforced fighting spirit. Rommel predicted months, perhaps years, would be needed before Americans became serious opponents. Other generals expected similar defeats to repeat easily. But Rommel observed something unexpected after Kasserine. The Americans were not broken. They did not wait for others to solve problems. They reorganized rapidly, almost unnaturally, as if the defeat had awakened determination rather than destroyed morale. Within weeks, Dwight Eisenhower relieved Fredendall. George Patton took command of Second Corps. Patton arrived like a tornado of energy, fury, and uncompromising demand for excellence. He enforced discipline with mania-level intensity. Soldiers who slouched through Kasserine were now standing at attention, polishing brass, wearing helmets and neckties at all times, training harder than ever. Officers faced fines for improper uniform. Court-martial threatened anyone showing cowardice. Patton drove his men relentlessly, knowing something Rommel was only beginning to suspect. The Americans who broke at Kasserine were not soldiers yet. They could become soldiers, and faster than anyone imagined. If you are fascinated by stories of transformation under fire, like this video, subscribe and comment below. Do you think Kasserine could have broken American morale permanently? The transformation revealed itself at El Guettar on March 23, 1943, just 4 weeks after Kasserine. Patton positioned forces across the approaches to the vital pass. German tanks of the 10th Panzer Division advanced with confidence, expecting another rout. They were catastrophically wrong. Mines disabled lead tanks, channeled vehicles into killing zones. Tank destroyers fired from concealed positions. Infantry held ground with discipline absent a month prior. artillery unleashed precise, coordinated barrages. German soldiers faced something entirely new. American infantry combined with integrated firepower that shattered expectations. They had learned rapidly, adapted quickly, and fought with an aggression and coordination the Germans had never seen in February. American infantry in 1943 was no longer the green, inexperienced force Rommel had dismissed at Kasserine. By the spring of 1943, their transformation had become undeniable. The Americans, once underestimated, were evolving into a machine of relentless precision and terrifying coordination, reshaping German expectations on every battlefield. German commanders had assumed that American mistakes at Kasserine would repeat endlessly. They believed American units lacked discipline, cohesion, and tactical sense. But those assumptions ignored a critical factor. The Americans were learning faster than anyone imagined. Every misstep became a lesson, every failure a catalyst for unprecedented adaptation. By mid-spring, this learning army would demonstrate why German soldiers feared American infantry above all other Allied forces. The months following Kasserine Pass were a period of intense transformation for American forces. Dwight Eisenhower, understanding the urgency, replaced Major General Lloyd Fredendall with George Patton, a commander whose reputation for discipline and innovation was unmatched. Patton arrived in Tunisia like a whirlwind of energy, demanding obedience, precision, and relentless training. Soldiers who had panicked under Rommel's first blow were now drilled to the last detail, brass polished, uniforms immaculate, weapons maintained with obsessive care. American officers were no longer passive observers. They became aggressive planners, coordinating artillery, tanks, and infantry in ways German commanders had never anticipated. Engineers, previously relegated to defensive works, began constructing complex obstacle networks, minefields, and camouflage positions. Forward observers practiced rapid fire corrections, calculating trajectories with mechanical precision, linking artillery batteries with infantry objectives. The learning was systematic, almost mechanical, yet astonishingly effective. Within weeks, reports from German reconnaissance indicated a worrying trend. The Americans were no longer predictable. They anticipated attacks, reinforced weak points, and counterattacked with surprising efficiency. What had once been a chaotic, uncoordinated force was now methodical, adaptable, and terrifyingly effective. By March 23, 1943, at Guettar, the 10th Panzer Division experienced the first demonstration of this new American capability. Mines disabled lead tanks. Infantry held their ground. Tank destroyers fired from concealed positions with deadly accuracy. Artillery barrages were synchronized and devastating. German commanders were stunned. American infantry did not stop at adaptation. They mastered integration. Each soldier became a node in a larger system, multiplying the effectiveness of weapons, armor, and support units. Forward observers could call down fire from dozens of batteries in minutes. tanks coordinated seamlessly with infantry squads. Engineers improvised solutions on the battlefield, welding hedgerow cutters for Shermans in Normandy, devising explosive charges to breach obstacles, and rapidly implementing new techniques without waiting for high command approval. The system's brilliance was in its combination of speed, coordination, and redundancy. Communication chains extended from the front line to corps headquarters, linking infantry calls, tank movements, and artillery fire with near instantaneous precision. German officers described the effect as overwhelming, unpredictable, and relentless. By June 1944, during the Normandy landings, this capability reached full maturity. American forces breached heavily defended beaches, overcame hedgerows, and advanced against entrenched German positions with a fluidity that German commanders had never imagined. American artillery, a cornerstone of this system, was particularly feared. The fire direction centers, developed in the quiet years between wars, centralized targeting and coordination. Time-on-target techniques ensured that batteries of differing calibers fired simultaneously, saturating targets without warning. The introduction of proximity fuses in December 1944 magnified this effect, creating airburst shells that shredded infantry in foxholes, trenches, and defensive positions. German veterans recalled that no weapon, not even tanks or Luftwaffe aircraft, struck as much fear into their hearts as American artillery. If you were a German soldier facing this level of coordinated firepower in 1944, would you have surrendered or fought to the last? Comment below with your thoughts on how fear shapes combat decisions. What truly distinguished American infantry was not just combat skill, it was industrial and logistical mastery. German forces relied on patchwork artillery, captured weapons, and heterogeneous supply lines. American forces, by contrast, standardized equipment, ammunition, and training. Tanks destroyed on the front were replaced within days. Artillery shells, bullets, and food arrived with unbroken consistency. Trucks moved supplies at a scale Germans could not comprehend. Every man, every weapon, every vehicle was part of a system that multiplied battlefield efficiency beyond individual capability. By the fall of 1944, these advantages culminated in operations such as Cobra and the Falaise Pocket. Massive bombardments combined with precise infantry and armored maneuvers annihilated elite German divisions. The Panzerlehr Division, previously one of Germany's finest, was decimated. Over 1,000 German soldiers were killed in hours. Tanks and vehicles destroyed. Command structures shattered. The Americans, using industrial, tactical, and organizational superiority, achieved a level of battlefield dominance that German commanders described as unthinkable just months earlier. The consequences of this transformation were profound. Kasserine Pass had initially reinforced German assumptions of American weakness, but the rapid evolution of American infantry shattered that illusion permanently. By integrating firepower, mobility, training, and industrial capacity, American forces created a force multiplier effect that German planners could not counter. Every encounter taught Germans that they could not rely on past experience. The Americans were unpredictable, adaptable, and fearsome. This understanding shaped German strategy from Normandy to the Rhine, forcing constant re-evaluation of assumptions and planning under the shadow of American mastery. American infantry had proven themselves not by accident, but by deliberate adaptation, relentless discipline, and integrated systems of warfare. The men who panicked at Kasserine became the victors at Guettar, Normandy, and across Western Europe. Their evolution redefined modern combat, demonstrating that industrialized warfare demanded more than courage. It required coordination, innovation, and speed. If you found this story of American infantry transformation under fire compelling, check out our next video on how Allied combined arms strategies shattered the Axis in Italy. Another case of adaptation that changed the course of the war forever.